Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Creator Lab at NAB. This is day 3, and we're so excited that you're here for the first panel. I'm RJ Larice. I've worked in the creator economy for over 10 years, first on the agency side, then at Paramount for 7 years, building and running all of their creator programs. And now I run a management company called 16th for Creators that's a part of Whaler Group. And so I'm so excited for all of the conversations that are happening today, starting with conversation 1, which is a hot topic that I think everyone is thinking about. It's the AI training economy. And we have Mitch Rotter here from Shutterstock, who's going to talk to you about AI. So let's welcome Mitch to the stage, and we'll see you in a second.
All right. You can hear me okay? I'm going to move that. All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming today. My name is Mitch Rotter. I'm the Director of Strategic Content Acquisition for Shutterstock. Shutterstock, you may be familiar with, been around for quite some time, rights manage, stock photography, stock video, 3D models, a lot of different assets that enterprise and end users use for creative works. Outside of that business, so not part of the marketplace or what we would consider the Shutterstock core business, we also service commercial partners who leverage content for AI training for their models. And so today we're going to talk about something that is already happening, not where AI may go, but where the revenue is that is showing up today. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. So we're going to talk about revenue opportunities if you are a library owner or you sit on top of content. That could be creator content, broadcast, could be radio, could be podcast. Basically, any type of entertainment media can be leveraged for this economy. All right. So most content libraries are built for distribution, right? You shoot it, you package it, you send it out to YouTube or another streamer. But, and the goal is to have people watch it. How many views did I get? Were there ads served against it? So that's essentially the mature business that we're in for media distribution. But AI training really values that content in a different way, and it looks at it in a completely different way. So if you're looking at the library, your library, the same way that you always have, you're probably undervaluing it relative to this piece of the burgeoning economy. So I just do want to point out that AI training is a revenue stream today. People are actively participating in it. It's not theoretical. It's not emerging. It's already happening. People are active in it, but the participation is very uneven. Some people are really leaning into it and organizing, organizing their organization to participate and to think about metadata and different use cases. Others are confused or they're resistant to it. And others, frankly, just don't necessarily understand that what they're sitting on does have value. So what we're seeing is very uneven participation. And my goal for today is to educate you on the possibilities if you are sitting on top of a media library, what those opportunities could be. So in the meantime, the market is moving, and it's moving relatively quickly. I think we hear about that in the news every single day. But this isn't AI an existential conversation. This isn't AI as a workflow tool that you'll see a lot here. This is very specifically, I have content, large language models can train on that, and I can generate revenue from that. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, I guess. AI training, licensing your content for AI training is not licensing your content for generative AI or for derivatives. This is not about how a person can go to an interface and type in a prompt and recreate derivatives of that. So if you're, licensing Friends, this isn't so a world of fan fiction can kind of come out where people are making new episodes of Friends. What AI labs do is they look for underlying patterns, their statistical analysis, trend analysis of that content and the metadata that's associated with it. And that's a fairly important piece that we'll talk about in a second. But it's really about identifying these underlying patterns. It's recognition, not replication. That's something I want to be very clear about. It is not replication. It's about recognition. So this is the shift. right? Models are learning from signals. They're not learning from stories. To put it bluntly, they don't really care necessarily about your stories. They're not an audience, right? So they're not watching your content or listening to your content in the same way that an audience does. So story does not matter. The underlying performance doesn't matter, good or bad, doesn't matter. If it's won a ton of awards, it doesn't really matter. What matters is what's kind of happening on the screen or through the audio. Those two things can be separated, but it's really about what it is recognizing from that. So they're learning from signals. And what are those signals? There's motion, there's behavior, there's the environment that it's in. So that's where the real value is hiding. So if you think about that, like let's say a car chase, it's a movie scene with a car chase. It's not so a model can recreate hundreds of different car chases. What it's looking at is an object in motion. It's looking at the frame rate. It's looking at lighting, how the natural sunlight is bouncing off metal, how the wheels are turning, the sound that it makes. So what is that actually for? There are a lot of different use cases for that. It could be for, you see the little wheelie guys that are driving your DoorDash to you, right? Those are objects in motion that it has to recognize in order to weave its way around. And it can learn from that through those types of scenes. It can learn through that through other things that we'll look at as an examples in a couple slides. So let's talk about kind of the evolution of the market for a second. Shutterstock, we've been working with a lot of these companies for about 5 years. And it started with, Shutterstock has, let's say, 1 billion assets. And it started with, give us everything. We need everything that you have. And we will call that kind of pre-training, right? So they're just getting into their language models. They're trying to figure out what to do. They need 1 million pictures of a robin redbreast to understand what a robin redbreast actually looks like. But over time, that has become much more targeted, and we're now in what we call a fine-tuning phase, right? So it's not about how many of something you have. It's very specifically what those models can use to now train, because they have this large corpus already as kind of the buffer. So if you think of moving up the pyramid from broad and general use cases to very specific use cases, we're now in that kind of middle to the capstone part of this. So what that means in practice is we've gone from general to specific, and those data sets are now tied to specific use cases. So instead of we're starting our model, we need to train it, we need to get it to understand, language, et cetera. If you've ever, just to go back to a generative example, but if you've ever tried, a year ago to make a thumbnail on ChatGPT and you put text in and the text come back as gibberish, that was pre-training phase. Now those companies have licensed fonts. They've licensed, different types of ebooks or things like that. So they know how to generate text when a user wants a headline, when a user wants some sort of other text support on a thumbnail, as an example. And so it's now looking for more specific use cases. Maybe it wants to translate that language into 50 different languages. It wants to look at ways to understand the dynamic of layers in that thumbnail so that the assets kind of pop and it's appealing to a user, right? And so that's a very, very different market. So again, we've talked about the media orientation. Your media is packaged to be watched, right? It is oriented around the audience. How can I make something good that people want to watch, that they want to share, etc.? And you're packaging a finished work. I've made my video, I've made my podcast, whatever that may be. It's done. The artist work is finished, and I'm going to send that out into the wild, and I hope it does well. But training really requires a very completely different view. And not only that, but the assets that go into making your finished product often has as much value as the finished piece itself. So we like to say, there's a gold mine hidden in the cutting room floor. But what that means actually in practice is, let's use a film for an example. There's a script, there's a storyboard, there's pre-visualization, there's dailies, there's a rough cut, assembly cut, there's color correction, there's ADR, and there's a finished product. All of that has value across the chain. Why is that? Because a model wants to understand not just how it necessarily got to this beautiful image, but what types of filters were used, if there's EXIF data from the camera that they can use. So they understand the difference in frame rates. They understand the difference in how lighting or, medium shot or a wide shot or a close-up looks, how SD is different from HD, is different from 4K to 8K, etc. And so that kind of process that goes into creating a finished work oftentimes has as much value as the finished piece itself. So let's make this a little bit real. We're going to talk about metadata, for example. So, okay, sports. We're going to license sports. I'm a library owner. I sit on top of sports. It's basketball game. I will say, a league, right? I sit on top of basketball games. We have all this footage, finished games, talking head content, announcers, etc. But I can license you the game, but I don't control the team marks. I don't control the player's name and likeness rights. That's okay, because what the goal for the model is not to create more basketball games. What it's built to do is recognize objects in motion. And sports is a very good way to do that. There are many different data points happening all at once. People are running around. There's a ball moving. If you think of hockey, the puck moving. And so what's a use case for that? I'll look at the delivery robot again. It needs to recognize constantly shifting objects in space and make real-time decisions around that. It needs to understand velocity. It needs to understand depth of field. That could have a security application. That could have just broad general spatial awareness applications. So there's a lot of ways and a lot of value that the sports content has that's not about understanding the sport. It's about understanding what's actually happening on screen. Family dinner, nice, great scene in a movie. If you ever seen Nutty Professor, I know that dates me a little. Eddie Murphy's playing all the characters. It's hilarious. They're talking to each other. But even in a drama or a sitcom, there's a family sitting around a table. They're having a nice dinner. What that is looking for from a training standpoint is conversational audio and real life interaction, right? It's about how natural language works, how people react to that, what types of volume or facial expressions are going along with that. So what's the use case for that? Well, we're moving into a world of virtual customer support or VR-based agents. And the more that they can be naturalistic in how they talk, the more they can mimic not only human expression to you, but if you've ever been on customer support for a long time and you're starting to get frustrated, it can actually recognize kind of the change in your behavior, the change in your demeanor, the change in your voice and the patterns, and it gets that through this conversational audio. So then track that back to a library. That could be film, it could be a podcast, 2 people having conversation, 5 people having conversation, radio morning shows, etc. So conversational audio is a very big deal, especially as it relates to this customer service part or, agent-based robotics, avatars, etc. One more example, props. You would look at this and be like, oh, I've created, a lightsaber. I have a cup of coffee sitting on top of a chessboard for my scene. Maybe you're a prop house or you work kind of in a physical environment. These have a lot of value, again, not because it needs another picture or a 3D model of a cup, but what it does is it understands 3D objects in space, three-dimensionally, top, bottom, all the way around. What's the use case for that? There's world building. There's digital twins. So if you're in an environment, let's say gaming, and the more realistic it can be, the better the gaming experience is. And everything underpowering that is how these models train on that content to create a more realistic experience in those environments. Let me just stop there. I'm going to do questions at the end, but any questions about this so far? Because I know that's a little bit to unpack. Okay, great. So how do you optimize the value? Okay, great. I have a library. I own it. I control it. What I want to do is I'd like to make some revenue off of it. That sounds wonderful. What do I need to do? What's driving value in this context? So there's a few things. It's not just about, I'm going to walk over here. My eyesight's going bad. But, obviously there's an asset type. Right. And we work across a wide variety of, we call them modalities. That's a fancy word for format. But in this kind of media and entertainment space, video, again, radio, for national broadcasters, archive stuff. It doesn't necessarily, again, it doesn't specifically care if it came out last week or if it's 20 years old, as long as it can get to what it needs to get to. So, what are the asset types? Volume is a player. It can't train on an hour. It trains on 1,000 hours, 10,000 hours, in the aggregate, 100,000 hours. That doesn't mean you have to supply 100,000 hours yourself, but what it's doing is it's trying to collect enough across different modalities. So again, to go back to that statistical analysis and the trends, it actually understands what it's looking at. This is key, the richness of the metadata. The metadata, as I said and showed before, the metadata is the map. Let's say you are a movie distributor, you have metadata. Of course, you're a music library, you have metadata. But a lot of times that metadata is focused on search and discovery, right? It's here's a synopsis, here's the duration, the rating if it's a movie, it's, who the cast is, who the director is, what year it came out, and all that is helpful. So if you're at Netflix and you're looking for something to watch, you don't sit there on the home screen for 20 minutes. You go, I don't know, what do you want to watch? You're like, oh, I love Project Hail Mary. Ryan Gosling's awesome. What else has Ryan Gosling been in? Let's look at that. But for this specific training use case, what it wants to do is find that car chase, right? So there's annotations. This is a very dense part of the presentation. There's what's happening on screen. So the annotations, what's happening on screen against a time code. Because if you have an hour and a half piece of work and the training model is looking for that car chase, and the car chase happens over, the first 12 minutes of the Italian Job, or, pick a movie that has a great chase sequence in it, it wants to get at that. It is not looking at, even though it's a finished piece to the owner, it is not looking at what we would call raw data, the video itself. It needs to map that metadata to what's happening on screen. If you're a creator, librarian, and you do a podcast, having that transcript, because it'll take the video and the audio, but also the written transcript and match it. So to go back to conversational audio, where are places where people are laughing? Where are places where there may be sentimental analysis around friction in the conversation? And again, to go back to that customer support agent use case, it needs to be able to find that. It doesn't want to sift through a 2-hour podcast. It wants to find those 4 minutes. And very important piece, everything that we do, the DNA of Shutterstock, and this is very clear from case law. So even, this is not specifically a commercial for Shutterstock, but if you participate in this economy, there is value and only value in working with these companies if you own the copyright and you have the releases, right? So if you think about what I mentioned in that pre-training world and companies licensing Shutterstock's corpus of stock imagery and stock video, that's all rights managed, rights first content, all the model releases are there. It's all very clear, right? So if you own the content, you have the copyright to that content. And then if there's underlying third-party IP, so let's say there's a Van Gogh in the background, maybe that's copyright, somebody's wearing a Nike logo or something, you don't necessarily have to have the clearances for that, but there needs to be some recognition, because the model will then ignore that. You are not granting it the rights to use a basketball player's name and likeness. You're granting it the rights to use the basketball game, and it will exclude that. If you do have name and likeness, if you do have property release, third-party IP release, that actually then ratchets up the value one more notch, because then it's fully unencumbered. It doesn't have to pick and choose what it's allowed to train on in that context. And then lastly, I think if you're working directly with a training lab there, it's changed a little bit, but people wanted, we want your content and data. We want to do whatever we want with it, and we want to do it as long as we can. Our approach, which I think is the smart approach, is really not doing anything in perpetuity. Things move very fast in this market. So, it's definitely term bound, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, whatever that may be, and exclusivity, right? If you are working with one partner, like, pick a hyperscaler large language model, there's a good chance that other large language models have similar use cases, they're all kind of racing towards the same finish line. If you think about it from the, again, to date myself, the browser wars, nobody's, thinking about Lycos or Alta Vista anymore. Nobody's using Netscape as their browser. Who the big players are today may not necessarily be the big players in a year. So it behooves you to really protect your opportunities to take as many at-bats as possible. At this point, there's a decision. So participating in the training economy requires a choice. Like, one, let's assume that you want to do that. You want to generate money from your assets, revenue from your assets. So, what are the choices? As with any type of thinking about new technology, as with anything else, you can build it internally. Companies are doing that. Media companies are doing that. But there's obviously a time factor. There's a cost factor. There's infrastructure. And of course, you can partner with companies. So partner gets you to market faster. There's scale there. There's probably the existing sales channels and the expertise really to understand, what's going to work or what's not. Both choices are fine. They're not necessarily one is better than the other. It's really more about where you are now and how you want to orient yourself and your business moving forward. So Shutterstock, that's what we do. I sit on top of a business. We, like I said, have been licensing our corpus for some time to different partners. And over that time, they said, oh, this is great, but could you get us conversational audio? Could you get us 3D models? We need that more at scale. And so what we started about a year and a half ago is what we call our data partner network. So this is built for library owners that want to participate. They don't necessarily have the wherewithal or the organizational fortitude to build that type of metadata mapping in-house. Maybe some stuff is digitized, maybe some stuff is not. But, we think about it first from the rights. Are you able to grant the license? Do you own the copyright to this underlying content? That is very important. As I mentioned, there's plenty of case law where, some player would be scraping, let's say, ebooks, and a publisher sued them for that type of scraping. And, that publisher was awarded, you can look it up, a fairly significant judgment and damages, about $1.5 billion. It worked out to be about $1,500 an ebook. That was just for the damages, right? So the rights management, we put that first, always, every day. The second, we have direct partnerships across the ecosystem. This is not, we hope that one of the large language models work with us. We have existing master services agreements in place. We fulfill content by work order. We have a dedicated sales and partner management team that is embedded with those organizations to understand what the data scientists and research labs are looking for so that we can proactively bring stuff to them. We're prognosticating, we have this new podcast network in our library now. It's, 10,000 hours. It's annotated, time-stamped, fully transcribed, etc. All rights cleared. And, we can move that in. But at the same time, when a partner comes to us and saying, we're really ratcheting up our conversational audio training right now, what do you have? We can look across the breadth of our data partner network and say, okay, well, we have Podcast Network A, we have Movie Studio B, and Movie Studio B can deliver the audio abstracted from the video. So if you just want to train on the audio, that's fine as well. And the structured metadata and curation. That's, again, a big piece. The value unlock, the force multiplier here is the metadata. So again, if your metadata is oriented towards search and discovery or however it's oriented, it's not a limiting factor. The partners in this space, including Shutterstock, are able to process that video, to understand the different reference points, to build those annotations. And that's part of the added value that gives you that comfort, but also the speed to market. I think that's really the key thing, because if you start today from jump and you're like, how fast can I get this done? Especially if you're going through a lot of titles or a lot of files, it can take quite a bit of time. And lastly, the packaging of that itself, because there's a go-to-market standpoint. Why is this content differentiated? How is it different from other training materials that you may have? Pricing power is very important, right? You want to make sure that you're getting the right terms, and both from the like the term, not perpetuity, term bound, annualized, etc., but also the commercial terms as well. So pricing power is very important. And then how that's actually packaged and delivered. I'm not a technologist from that respect, but it's, AWS bucket to AWS bucket, again, rights managed, secure, et cetera, et cetera. So that's, pretty much it from me. The takeaway that I'd want to leave you with is that your libraries have value, and you should look at it through a different lens, because the value is here and the training economy is happening now. How long that lasts is anybody's guess, but it is a very active opportunity today. And that opportunity just may not be where you've necessarily been looking. So kind of going back and thinking about it through this lens is very helpful. So we have about 5 minutes for questions. I'm happy to do that. I'll also be here for a few minutes after. And if you scan the QR code, there's a form on the Shutterstock website if you're a library owner that will allow you, it'll come directly to me. Excuse me. Any questions that anybody has, don't be shy. Let's have the microphone.
Here you go. First question.
Yeah. Is there value to video content, older video content, pre-HD content?
Yeah, it's a great question. So archive content for sure. If the use case is obviously for we need 4K video to train on 4K video, no. But there are in our, I don't know specifically what is it, like older movie content or documentary or yeah, so sports content. So sports has been, volleyball. Yes, the game has evolved, but volleyball is still a ball that gets hit by 3 people and spiked, bumps that spike, defense, etc. And so that content still has the same value as a shot that was done last week. Where the difference maybe is, again, we want 69 aspect ratio instead of 4:3, or it's only SD, we need HD, but that is not a limiting factor. It's just kind of how it's positioned and packaged, so that the sales channel knows what the underlying quality is around that. But any type of archive sports definitely has value. And for that matter, as it relates to movies, again, it's like I mentioned, it's not, movies or TV, or if you're a creator, it's not the video that you made last week. You may be sitting on 5-10 years of content that you've created. All that stuff still has value. Thank you.
Did you have one? Oh, amazing. Next question. Here you go.
Hey, you mentioned content that maybe someone has rights to, but there's a portion of it that they don't have rights to, like copyrighted music or
Sure.
maybe like a certain athlete or something. Do you do that separation and take that out, or do providers sort of need to bring it to you absent whatever that
No, we can do that separation. Yeah. Or you can do it. But the important point is what the rights grant is this and not that. So that is for the full stream all the way through. Yeah.
Next question. Here we go.
Hi, good morning. How much value does video have in relation to the other items, the actionable items that you spoke of in terms of voice?
Yeah.
And the quality of that video? If we shoot it in 4K, does that have more value than regular?
So there's a couple dimensions that I'll use to answer that, right? So there's a scarcity piece, right? So 8K is more scarce than 4K. 8K may have more value. Maybe it's visual effects and the layered file, not necessarily the visual effects, but the files, this is again where my technology fails me, but the chroma keys and the lighting and what goes into that. If you're just talking about video like as a whole, yes, it has value. And then I say this a lot, it depends, right? Because it goes back to that use case. So if it is, we license a lot of video as a whole, but just 2 days ago, we got a request saying we want movie content, but we only want the audio track. Or we work with production music libraries. They only want stems, as an example, because again, it's not about the recreation part. It's about being able to kind of understand the bits and pieces that go into a whole. Did that answer the question in a way? Yeah. So yes, it has value. Depends on what the use case is or who needs what at any given time. But again, there's no limiting factor with that, similar to the old, SD versus HD. It just really depends on what's going on at that time.
I know you can't totally answer this, but can you give a ballparks of value? Yeah, I know this is a really hard one to answer, depending on your requests. We've got tens of thousands of high school sports games. And, some of it's digitized, some of it's old. It goes all the way back to the '90s. What would something like that even be worth?
Yeah,
Like,
so I
what's the
can't.
value of even digitizing it.
It depends on the cost of digitizing it. So start with that. I can't give you like specifics because it all depends, and that's proprietary. But large libraries generally are priced per minute, and then the metadata is like the force multiplier. So I will say for your use case, it all definitely has value. The scale of what you have is value, but being able to understand, maybe the older stuff that's not digitized, I'm assuming there's probably maybe it's sitting on a hard drive somewhere or a reel. I don't, D2 tape or something like that. Like, there is a cost to doing that, and that's something that has to be kind of figured out. But it is a meaningful opportunity. Like, I'll put it like that. Maybe start with the stuff that isn't digitized, and then kind of saying we have 10,000 hours that's ready to go, and another 50,000 hours in the back. And then you kind of go to market with 10,000 hours. And then, oh, we like this. What else is there? Okay, well, now we can get started on the stuff that's kind of sitting in dust. Yeah. All right, everyone. Well, that's my time. I really appreciate the engagement. Thank you. Like I said, I'll be here. I'd love to meet you. And thanks. It's been great.